Hi, I'm Warren, and my sister told me, at my own engagement party, you're not good enough to be part of this family. She banned me, right there, in front of everyone I loved. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? It wasn't sudden. It was planned, quietly, over years. While I smiled beside her, she erased my name from my work, took credit for everything I built, turned our family against me. I thought I'd lost my voice, until the night I took it back. But what happened after, I never saw coming. I walked into that hall thinking maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The chandeliers sparkled like stars held captive indoors, and the faint sound of a live piano drifted through the room like something out of a movie. Everything looked perfect, polished, intentional, and I felt like an imposter wrapped in silk. Ethan stood by the entrance, all ease and charm, shaking hands with my cousins like he belonged there. I tried to match his energy, smiling at distant relatives I hadn't seen since the last funeral. But inside, something was twitching, the kind of twitch you get when the air is just a bit too still, when you notice someone isn't looking at you. Mallory, my sister, stood near the bar. She was sipping champagne, her posture impeccable, her gaze avoiding mine like we were strangers. That silence. It echoed louder than the clinking of glasses or the soft applause when Ethan introduced me. I once heard someone say, sometimes silence in a room speaks louder than applause. That night it screamed. I should have known then. When she didn't smile, when her eyes brushed past me like I didn't exist, still I greeted every guest with warmth I didn't feel. Hugged people I didn't trust. I was raised to be gracious, polite even when the world is cracking beneath you. But my stomach twisted every time Mallory's cold glance landed near me. She made some offhand comment about my dress, bold choice, red always draws attention, and mumbled something about how Ethan must have picked the wine. It was subtle, passive, but it cut deeper because it was her. Mallory and I were never close. Growing up, she was the one Mom praised for her poise, her grades, her perfect posture. I was the messy one, the younger sister chasing crumbs of approval. And now, on the night meant to celebrate my future, I felt like that little girl again, begging silently to be good enough. She never really let me forget where I stood in the family, always a step behind, always earning. Still, I told myself to breathe, smile. This night wasn't about the past, it was about Ethan, about us. That was the lie I clung to, until she took the mic. It was right after Ethan raised his glass, about to toast. Mallory interrupted, stepping forward with a calm, "I'll never understand." "Before we continue," she said, "I just need to say something." I froze. She looked right at me, then turned to the crowd. "I know everyone here wants to believe this fairy tale," she started. "But are we really going to pretend she's not faking this perfect life?" The room shifted. Eyes turned. Forks paused mid-air. "Warren," she continued, "you've always been good at pretending to care, pretending you belong." Then she said it. "You're not good enough for this family, or for him." That line, it sliced through the air like a guillotine, fast, brutal, final. Gasps. Whispers. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing like he could pull me out of the moment. But Mallory wasn't finished. "You've always been a disappointment. Mom may not say it, but we all know. You chose this life, and it's pathetic." I looked at my mother. She stared at her champagne like it held answers. My father looked down. No one stood up. No one stopped her. It was a free fall, and no one tried to catch me. Then, the blow I didn't see coming. Mallory pointed straight at me. "You're no longer welcome in this family if this is the life you choose." Silence. Thick. Suffocating. People began shuffling, murmuring. A few guests slipped toward the exit. Others stood frozen, unsure whether to offer comfort or stay out of the blast zone. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just looked at her. And for once, I didn't see the sister I used to admire. I saw a woman clawing for control, terrified I might finally rise without her permission. So I left, not in defeat. But because staying would mean validating the poison, I walked past them all, past the stunned cousins, past the camera phones someone had forgotten to put away, past my parents who couldn't meet my eyes, out into the night air where I could breathe. That walk wasn't shame, it was clarity. It wasn't her words that broke me, it was how many people didn't stop her. The sun was already up when I realized I hadn't moved from the kitchen table. My coffee sat untouched, now lukewarm, but I kept holding it like it anchored me to something real. The echo of her voice, "You're not good enough," kept looping in my head, relentless, like a radio station I couldn't turn off. Every time I blinked, I saw the room, the frozen faces, the way no one flinched when she said it. No one even cleared their throat. That silence did more damage than her words ever could. I tried standing, tried pretending that this was just another Sunday morning, that I'd cook breakfast, text Ethan, maybe take a walk. But the quiet was heavy. It pressed in, like the walls were listening. This house. It had always felt like a reset button, but today, even the air felt different, still, almost apologetic. Family wounds cut deeper because they're meant to be safe. I read that once in a dog-eared book from college. I didn't get it back then. Now. It was the only sentence that made sense. I don't know why I opened that storage box. I was actually looking for my passport, something to keep my hands busy. But as soon as I peeled back the flaps, the smell of old paper hit me. Photos, birthday cards, some dried-up macaroni art I made in second grade. And then I saw it. One picture from a birthday party I barely remembered. I was turning 8. There were balloons, a unicorn cake, and Mallory, holding the gift my aunt had bought for me. It clicked. I remembered the argument. I cried. Mallory claimed it was hers. My mom said, "Just let her have it, sweetheart. It's not worth the fight." That became a pattern. She lied. I got scolded for reacting. She won. I was told, "Be the bigger person." One day, when I was maybe 12, Dad pulled me aside. I thought he was going to praise me for something. I had just won a school essay contest. Instead, he sighed and said, "Mallory just needs more attention. She's not like you." That line sat with me for years. I carried it like a rule. Don't outshine her. Don't compete. Let her win. Let her speak. I used to think the rivalry was in my head, that maybe I was just oversensitive. But it wasn't in my head. It was built into the house I grew up in, brick by brick, smile by smile. I didn't realize how deep that favoritism ran until I got a message from my cousin Jessica later that afternoon. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about last night," she wrote. "Honestly, some of us weren't surprised. Your mom's been saying things for weeks." I stared at the screen, read it twice, then 3 times. I texted back, "What things?" She responded with a screenshot of a group chat I didn't even know existed, a thread between a few relatives. My name had come up, my engagement, my intentions. She trapped him. She's rushing things. Ethan doesn't seem that into it. My mother had said Ethan was too good for me. That maybe he was too refined for someone like me, and they all agreed. Suddenly, the dinner 2 months ago made more sense. My mom kept asking Ethan about his job, pushing, digging, pressing like an interrogator in a police drama. He laughed it off, said it was fine, but I remember how stiff his smile became. I thought she was just being cautious, protective. But now I knew. She wasn't protecting me. She was warning him. I shut my phone and stared at the blank wall above the kitchen sink. I didn't feel sad. Not in the way people expect. It wasn't tears or heartbreak. It was hollow. Like someone had stolen my reflection. They didn't just sit by and watch Mallory humiliate me. They believed she was right. I walked to my office and pulled out an old journal. I hadn't touched it in years. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowing. I flipped to an entry from my sophomore year in college. "I feel like I'm everyone's second choice," I had written. "I don't want to be pitied. I want to be believed." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that follows a bad diagnosis, sharp, ironic, and cruel. Everything that happened last night. I'd been training for it my whole life. Being dismissed, being doubted, being told to sit down so someone else could stand taller. I picked up my phone and started typing a message to my mother. It was short, just a few words, but I stopped, deleted it, sat back. The house was still quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like filling the silence. Instead, I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The one person Mallory couldn't control. I found the box while cleaning out my home office. It was one of those boxes labeled "Do Not Open," dusty at the edges, taped shut. I hesitated, but then peeled the tape off, my fingers trembling slightly. Inside was my old grad school phone. It still worked. I charged it on the desk, leaning back in the chair, wondering what ghosts I'd wake. When I scrolled through the voicemails, I wasn't prepared for what I heard. Mallory's voice crackling with smug superiority. She mocked everything I'd done, my choice in classes, my passion projects, the way I argued ideas. "Another useless women's studies course," she sneered. "You'll never land a real man thinking like that." She laughed, and I froze. That voice had lingered in background noise for so long I thought I was imagining it, but hearing it again, clear and unfiltered, it felt like damage. I remember how I dropped out, just shy of finishing. I blamed myself then, but this message, it showed I wasn't the problem. Mallory's mockery was part of a pattern, something bigger than me. I replayed it over and over, the way she said "never," the emphasis on "real man." It felt like drowning in someone else's judgment. All those years I let them define what I could be. Not long after, Ethan called. We met at our favorite cafe in the Dallas suburbs, the kind with chipped paint, soft light, the smell of roasted beans that always grounded me. He looked at me across the table, nervously stirring cream in his coffee. "I need to tell you something," he said. I braced. He took a breath. "Mallory told me not to propose, said you were emotionally fragile and might trap me with guilt." I stared at the coffee. Bitter. He said he didn't believe it at first, thought it was the usual protective sister thing, but the look on Mallory's face when she spoke to his friend said more than she meant. It was strategy masked as concern. And it cut deeper than any insult because it was truth twisted to look like care. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I thanked him for honesty and asked for space. Walked outside into warm daylight, chest tight. I watched families pass by, people with quiet laughter. Everything looked ordinary, but inside I felt torn. Part of me wanted to hide. Another part wanted to burn every bridge that bound me to this false life. I drove until I reached the place where I once painted murals years ago, before all this. My journal was in the glove compartment, pages filled with dreams, regrets, spilled ink. I flipped to a page. I don't want to be pitied. I want to be believed. I'd written that when I was hardly known by anyone. Reading it now, I felt a quiet heat. Not anger, so much as recognition. Acceptance of who I had been, and who I must still be. The past wasn't quiet anymore. It spoke, and I understood I could no longer let it whisper. Ending that day, I typed something into my phone, hot with truth, raw with longing, but didn't send it, not yet. But I saved it, held it for the moment I needed strength most. I opened the day in my studio surrounded by half-finished canvases and tools that felt more honest than people. No congratulations, no flowers, just silence and the smell of turpentine. A courier arrived with a magazine I didn't order. I flipped it open. There it was, the big headline. Mallory Harrington, visionary artist, philanthropist. Beneath it, my installation photo. Credit to Mallory. My chest tightened. The photo was mine. The idea was mine. But someone else's name was underneath. I remember thinking, in that moment, invisibility was not just being unseen. It was someone else writing your story, and no one asking if you'd written it. I called the editor. I told him I made that piece. He paused, said submissions were confusing, said Mallory had more public appeal, didn't apologize, just looked at me like I was making trouble. They whispered that I worked behind the scenes, That Mallory's public image needed something like my art, as though I were a shadow meant to be uncredited. Then someone dropped a USB off my desk, labeled Mallory Studio Harrington promo footage. I plugged it in begrudgingly. My sketches, the presentation I rehearsed alone at midnight, even my voiceover from a video I never released, all claimed by Mallory in glowing terms. Bloggers praised Mallory as a genius. A visual prodigy, someone said. Meanwhile, I sat behind my screen, red with betrayal. I grabbed screenshots. I tracked timestamps. I copied metadata. My hands shook. I felt shame, but I also felt something else. Calculation. I wrote a post titled, "What Happens When Your Art Becomes Someone Else's Headline." I didn't know who would read it, but I needed witnesses. That night, I packed up my supplies, took out my sketchbook, the one I drew my first self-portrait in. I saw lines I once erased because someone said, "This isn't good enough." Lines that now felt like bones of who I was supposed to become. I remembered a quote I once held on to. "The hardest battle is to recognize your own worth when everyone else devalues it." I repeated it in my mind. Then I sat down, drafted a statement, not a scream, not a smear campaign, a recounting of truth, citing names, dates, images, evidence. I reached for Aunt Maeve, sent her the proof. Called the radio host who praised Mallory's latest work. I asked for a chance to speak. Just once. My heart pounded when I hit send. I felt exposed, vulnerable, stronger. And then my phone buzzed. Notifications splashed across the screen. Support, questions, angry posts. One message glowed in the queue. "We need to talk," from my mother. I stared at my laptop in the early evening light, the screen glowing accusations. My inbox had exploded. Blog posts, comments, messages. Then I saw it. A screenshot of a draft email I never sent, published on a blog. My words twisted, manipulated to accuse me of copying Mallory's work. It was meant to discredit me. It felt like someone shoved a knife in my back while smiling in my face. They made it look like I admitted guilt. A line I never wrote. A confession I never meant. My heart dropped. My fingers shook. I stared at the ceiling, wanting to scream, but all I felt was stunned betrayal. Humiliation settled into my chest like an old wound reopened. I wiped my palms on my jeans, deleted half-written replies. I knew replying too soon would make me look reactive. Then Ethan called. He said, "They'll believe anything that looks good on paper." He didn't need to say more. I understood. I reached for my phone to call my parents, thinking maybe they'd stick by me. But I stopped. I knew I couldn't force their loyalty. Walking to Mom's house, the street lights started flickering. My reflection in a storefront window, a woman I barely recognized, someone who had spent years pretending silence was strength. I didn't want to pretend anymore. Standing in the hallway, Mom's voice was cool when I arrived. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. Then I asked about Mallory. Mom's eyes didn't meet mine. Her voice was calm. Her words cut deeper than any argument. "We're a family, and Mallory is, well, she needs us more." She made it clear who mattered. I felt something hollow inside. Not anger, not yet. More like disappointment. I asked about the email. She didn't deny it. She didn't want to stir things. She said loyalty was complicated. That sometimes truth had to be softened. That family came first. I turned away. Silence hung between us. I left without goodbyes. The porch light clicked off behind me. Outside, the wind was cooler. I walked blocks, past houses with front porches lit, couples eating dinner through windows. The world moved on, but I felt stopped, inverted. Everything I believed about fairness, about respect, felt fragile. I pulled out my phone, opened files, timestamps, metadata. I collected proof. I recognized that this moment, this breaking point, was inevitable. I had always hoped things would change, always hoped someone would hear me without judging. That hope had kept me small. Now I decided I'd stop hoping for validation from them. I'd build my own record, my own truth. I started drafting a letter, not to Mallory, but to every woman who'd been told to stay quiet for the family. A letter filled with all the moments stolen, all the silence endured, all the lines rewritten by someone else. Then my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. A voice from the past who had warned me Mallory would ruin me. The voice said she had proof too. I sat on the edge of my bed, flipping the engagement ring in my fingers. It still sparkled like the night Tanner gave it to me, clear, polished, perfect. But tonight, it felt heavier, like something borrowed, like something stolen. The air was too still, like the calm that shows up just before a storm hits. My mind circled back to Mallory's voice at the engagement party. How easily she'd taken over every conversation. How casually people said, "Tanner's lucky to join a family like hers." A vibration broke my thoughts. A message from Tanner. "Something doesn't feel right. Can we talk?" I exhaled. He finally saw it too. But when I looked down at the box I'd tucked into the back of my drawer, something shifted. It was empty. My chest tightened. The ring was gone. A few hours passed before Tanner's voicemail came through. His voice was hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was crossing a line. He told me he overheard Mallory at a dinner. She'd leaned over and said to his friend, "The ring was more my idea than his. He just went along with it." My stomach dropped. He also admitted something else. He'd made copies of emails between Mallory and the engagement planner, messages where she dictated every decision, every caption, every announcement. She even told them not to include my name in the press release. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I just sat there, holding it. Part of me didn't want to believe it. Part of me had known all along. Love doesn't blind you. It should sharpen your vision. I didn't respond right away. I needed to see it for myself. I drove across town in silence, the roads empty except for the occasional headlights. At home, I unlocked the display cabinet where I had first placed the ring that night, and there it was, sitting quietly under the soft light. But something was wrong. I picked it up, turned it slowly, and there, inside the band, faint but unmistakable, were initials. M.H. Mallory Harrington. I hadn't engraved anything. I never requested it. I would have remembered. My hands trembled. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was personal. This was invasive. I grabbed my phone and snapped photos, close-ups, date-stamped. I called the jeweler the next morning. They had no record of an engraving request from me. None. Mallory had taken something intimate, something sacred, and made it hers, like she'd been quietly collecting pieces of me, claiming them one by one. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I packed a bag, grabbed my folder of records, and drove to my parents' house. I walked in without knocking. Mom looked up from her crossword. Dad was in his recliner. Mallory wasn't home yet. "I need to talk," I said. "What about?" Mom asked, as if she didn't already know. "I want to see the contract with the engagement planner. And I want Tanner here when I do." She stared at me, then glanced at Dad. He didn't say a word. Tanner arrived 20 minutes later. I laid everything out, screenshots, emails, the photo of the engraving. Mallory arrived last. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes sharp. "I never did that," she said flatly. I held up the jeweler's statement. "You don't have to admit it. The proof is enough." Mom finally spoke. "Maybe this is just how things work. Maybe you're overreacting." My jaw clenched. That word again. I turned to Tanner. "Did you know about the engraving?" "No," he said. "I wouldn't have gone along with that." Mallory scoffed. "Why are we even doing this? This is ridiculous." I didn't yell. I didn't break. I just said, "If no one believes me, I'll still believe myself." The room went quiet. I drove back home with the ring case on the passenger seat. I didn't look at it until I got inside. When I opened it again, the engraving was gone. I walked into the gala that night wearing the outfit I chose weeks ago, hoping it would feel like stepping into my moment. The velvet rope parted, cameras leaned in, flashing lights caught my breath. I was introduced as fiancé's partner, a phrase I'd hoped wasn't going to matter. But then someone near the entrance pointed and said, "Look over there, that waiter." I froze. The guest said, "Oh, the help over there." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't mistaken. She meant me. The room spun a little. The humiliation burned. I held my head up. I heard whispers as I passed. Wasn't Warren supposed to help with the decor? I didn't know she did that. Mallory took the stage minutes later, lights on her face. She smiled. I realized I was just scenery. Someone else's backdrop. Not the person people came to see. Not the name the spotlight should hang on. Then my phone vibrated. An email arrived. Filed under my name. A complaint. False. Misrepresented facts that accused me of plagiarizing Mallory's speeches. My speech notes, words I drafted in the quiet hours, taken and twisted. I checked my drafts, intact, my files, safe, and yet someone had made this seem credible. Tanner came up beside me. His eyes were wide. "They're saying Mallory wrote everything, credited you behind the scenes," he whispered. I noticed the faces around us turning. Some sympathetic, some curious, others skeptical. My heart pounded, my voice caught in my throat. The laughter from earlier still floated in the air, like echoes in a hall after someone shouts. And now people were staring, waiting for me to fall. But I didn't. I took a breath. I stepped off the red carpet. I walked toward the exit. Not because they pushed me out, because I chose to leave with my dignity. Outside, the Texas night was sharp and cold. The wind slapped against my coat as I called Aunt Maeve, my voice trembling. I sent her screenshots, email headers, audio files. I asked for help, not pity, help to make this right. Then I called Ethan. I needed his voice, firm and calm. He listened without interrupting. When I told him about the email, about the plagiarism claims, his face hardened. "We'll set the record straight," he said. I believed him. For the first time in many nights. Inside, I drafted a public statement in my head. Not a rant. Not an accusation without proof. I would lay it out. What I created. What was taken. What was claimed. Evidence. Names. Dates. No fluff. No false hope. I know it might not fix everything. It might not change who believed what tonight. But staying silent was letting the lie win. By midnight, I was back at home, lights off, standing in front of the mirror in my foyer. The ring box was in my hand. I opened it. Flashed photos in my mind. Mallory walking across the stage, people applauding her name. Me, standing in shadows. But tonight, I felt something different. A clarity, not anger exactly, something colder, sharper. Resolve. If being seen meant pain, then I would accept it. If my name meant risk, then I would carry it anyway. The doorbell rang. I froze. Someone knocking. At midnight, I walked into the gallery that morning, heart pounding under every step. The banners read, "Mallory's Grand Vision, colors too bright against the cold white walls." Cameras pointed, chairs aligned, and in one hand, Braley handed me a press release. Thin paper, heavy words, announcing that Mallory would collaborate with my past works. My blood turned cold. She betrayed me publicly. Trust shattered in one fold of that paper. My sculptures were inside. The designs I labored over in midnight hours, the forms I molded with my own hands, were on display, but credited entirely to Mallory. I saw her name on plaques, heard the applause when she walked the gallery floor. My name whispered in shadow. I pressed against the crowd, trying to catch someone's eye, anyone who saw what I'd done, who knew what belonged to me. Security stopped me with gentle hands. "This is Mallory's event." The lie felt like a weight across my chest. My phone buzzed. Logan's name flashed. Screenshots. Emails. Messages. Braley said she sent. Blog posts manipulated. Evidence that Mallory orchestrated the entire exhibition, ordered captions, arranged the promotion, excluded me from interviews. My stomach clenched. Betrayal was a cold, sharp thing. I showed the curator. I showed Braley. Some gasped. Some looked away. My voice trembled, but I spoke. "This is mine. I made this." Standing under the center lights, I felt a heat building. Not shame, not sorrow, but a fight. I rose on the platform with the curator's nod behind me. I addressed the room. I told them the timeline, when I planned, when I built, what was mine and what was taken. I spoke for every artist hidden behind someone else's fame. Aunt Maeve and Logan stood in back, their faces lit with quiet pride. I ended with thanks, not because I needed their approval, but because I remembered who stood with me when I was afraid. The crowd was silent, then applause. Not just polite claps, but eyes meeting mine, some nodding, some apologizing with their looks. My phone buzzed again, while hearts pounded inside that gallery. Congratulations. You deserve this. And then the formal seal, an email from Mallory's lawyer. A cease and desist, demanding I stop using my name in public statements. I looked out over the crowd. I felt fear, but I also felt truth rising inside me. Tonight, I have my voice. They can try to erase it, deny it, lock it away. But I will speak anyway. I woke up just before sunrise. The house was still. The light barely crept through the kitchen blinds as I poured a cup of coffee. My hands trembled, not from fear anymore, but from the sudden stillness after weeks of chaos. I stepped outside into the garden, barefoot, letting the cold patio stones pull me back to the present. Aunt Maeve joined me, silent as always in the morning. She placed her cup beside mine and sat down with that soft thud of someone who's carried the weight of many lives. We didn't speak for a long while. That silence was healing. That silence was the exhale I didn't know I was holding. When the wind brushed past the wind chimes, she looked over and said quietly, "You don't have to win the war if you've reclaimed your peace." I nodded, not needing more words. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Later that morning, I opened my laptop and there it was, a new email from Mallory, short, formal. Crafted by PR. An apology of sorts, offering retroactive credit and a promise to donate her earnings to a charity of my choice. I didn't even finish reading it. I closed the tab, shut the screen, and walked back outside. The sculptures in my garden stood quietly, unaffected by headlines or fake apologies. I reached out and ran my fingers over one of the older pieces, one I made before anyone knew my name. Back then, there was no crowd, no cameras, no betrayal, just the feeling of creating something honest. That memory felt more like closure than any statement Mallory could offer. Braley reached out, asked if we could meet at a therapist's office. Not at home, not in public. I agreed. Not for her, but for myself. Logan drove me and waited in the parking lot while I walked in alone. The room smelled of eucalyptus and warm carpet. It was neutral, like it was designed to hold complicated feelings without judgment. Braley sat across from me. She looked tired, older, not the friend I remembered. She talked about pressure, jealousy, how she got pulled into Mallory's plans before realizing how far it had all gone. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, the therapist, middle-aged, soft-eyed, said, "Not all apologies require forgiveness, but they may deserve acknowledgement." I looked at Braley and said, "Thank you for coming. I'm not angry anymore, but I need distance. Not as punishment, just as peace." She nodded. She knew, and I left without hugging her. Back home, I made calls, legal steps, copyright filings. I submitted paperwork to protect my name, Warren, my voice, my art. The very things Mallory once tried to erase were now showing up in articles, in interviews, in podcasts, calling me an emerging voice in women's creative justice. Logan wrapped his arms around me while we listened to one of those episodes. "I'm proud of you," he said. I believed him. That weekend, I called Maeve again. And we started planning a community exhibit, one just for women over 60, no filters, no curators, just stories carved in paint, clay, thread, metal. We named it The Scene. On opening day, I placed the final sculpture on the corner pedestal. It was the oldest one I had, the one I made in silence, long ago. I stepped back, looked at it, then reached into my pocket as my phone buzzed. Unknown number. New York area code. I stared at it a moment. Was it a new door opening? Or an old one trying to find its way back?